My wife Vanessa gave me an ultimatum: open our marriage or lose her. I said yes, hoping it might save us. Weeks later, I came home early and found her with Jacob, her boss, in our bed. That night shattered me. Meeting Charlotte showed me what love could be. The photos on our wall now feel like museum pieces. Vanessa's charm, gone. Jacob's job, gone too. Back then, Vanessa and I were inseparable best friends since high school, sharing dreams, debts, and Spotify playlists. She talked about feeling trapped, but I thought it was just stress. Her late nights at work became frequent. Jacob's name came up more. I brushed it off. We'd been through so much, I couldn't imagine her straying. My only mistake was assuming love was enough. Charlotte wasn't even in the picture yet, and already I was losing her. She started journaling again, late night writing marathons with wine, candles, and whispered phone calls. I peeked once. The words weren't about us. They were about escape, identity, craving something real. She said Jacob understood her. I asked if she meant emotionally. She said mostly. That mostly clung to my spine like a warning. Still, I brought her breakfast in bed the next day. I thought acts of love could overwrite betrayal. That's when the damage truly began. Charlotte came into my life gently, first as a stranger who complimented my dog. Then as someone who listened. Vanessa noticed. Suddenly, she planned dates, posted old couple photos, and even left flirty notes. It wasn't love, it was damage control. The warmth in her eyes was gone. Every gesture felt rehearsed. Meanwhile, Charlotte and I laughed without trying. I told myself I wasn't cheating, but emotional lines blur fast when someone finally sees you. I suggested therapy. Vanessa said we didn't need a referee. She wanted space, but hated when I left. The irony didn't escape me. I began sleeping on the couch. She blamed me for checking out. But I'd already packed emotionally months ago. Charlotte wasn't a plan, she was peace. I found myself texting her late into the night, just to feel heard. Vanessa stopped noticing, or maybe she just stopped caring. Either way, silence became our soundtrack. Vanessa started accusing me, flipping her phone face down, deleting messages, then asking if I still loved her. I answered with actions: cooking her favorite meal, offering affection she no longer wanted. Her kisses were mechanical. Once, she laughed at something Jacob texted. Right in front of me. I froze. She didn't even notice. The disrespect was casual now. That night, I asked Charlotte if she believed in fate. Her answer made me ache with guilt and relief. The night Vanessa proposed opening up, she wore the same dress from our first date. She said it was liberating. I couldn't speak. She had already chosen Jacob. I was just being asked to cozen. I agreed, numb and ashamed. Later, I threw away our wedding photo. Charlotte noticed something had shifted. She touched my hand differently, like she knew I was drifting toward her. Vanessa never even asked why I cried in the shower that night. In counseling, I asked Vanessa a simple question: did it start before we opened up? She paused too long. Then she sobbed, confessing to oral sex with Jacob months earlier, in his office. The therapist stared. Stunned, I felt like vomiting. Vanessa collapsed to the floor. Clutching my legs, I stepped back. I need space, I said, voice cold. That night, I moved into a hotel. My silence screamed louder than her sobs ever could. Vanessa bombarded me with texts, old photos, apologies, memories. I didn't reply. I sat in that silent hotel room, staring at a blank wall, wondering how love turned into begging. Charlotte called once, just to say, I hope you're okay. She didn't ask for more. Her calmness contrasted Vanessa's chaos. The counselor left me a voicemail: you need to process this. I deleted it. I didn't want advice. I wanted a life that wasn't burning. When I returned to pack more clothes, Vanessa had made dinner, my favorite. She wore my hoodie. Eyes swollen from crying, I sat. Out of habit, not hunger. She asked if I could forgive her. I didn't answer. The wedding photo she'd tried to salvage now lay cracked on the floor. Symbolic, really. She reached for my hand. I let her touch it, then pulled away. I told her I was stopping counseling. She didn't argue this time. I met Charlotte for coffee. She asked nothing about Vanessa, just listened. I told her everything anyway. She didn't judge. Her eyes didn't pity, they held space. I cried for the first time. Public, ugly crying. She didn't flinch. She reached across the table, took my hand, and said, you don't have to carry this alone. That moment didn't erase the pain, but it lit a path forward. Finally, someone saw the ashes and didn't run. Jacob got fired. Her launched an investigation after an anonymous report about workplace affairs. I didn't send it, but I wasn't sorry. Vanessa's name came up too. She texted me, terrified. I didn't reply. Charlotte told me she'd seen Olivia, Vanessa's friend, at her office. Turns out Olivia had a fling with Jacob too. The circle was imploding. I wasn't celebrating, I just felt tired. Betrayal doesn't need justice to hurt less, it just needs distance. Olivia showed up at my apartment. Her face was pale, hands trembling. She said she lost Jacob's baby from stress. I didn't know what to say. She apologized for encouraging Vanessa, for being complicit. I let her speak. Pain has echoes, and hers matched mine. When she left, she handed me a sealed envelope, inside a printed chain of messages between Jacob and Vanessa before the open marriage began. My hands shook. So it was always a lie. The messages in Olivia's envelope were dated 6 months before Vanessa's ultimatum. They weren't innocent. Flirting, plans to meet, secret lunch photos. My stomach flipped. She hadn't just fallen for Jacob, she's orchestrated the fall. I sat alone, reading every word, feeling like a spectator in my own betrayal. Charlotte offered to come over. I declined. This moment, this truth was mine to face. The trust I gave Vanessa wasn't broken. It was sacrificed willingly by her. Jacob's fiancée messaged me. Her words were simple: thank you. I didn't know she'd found my number through Olivia. She sent screenshots. Vanessa had mocked me. Called me clueless, said she deserved excitement. My hands trembled. It wasn't just infidelity, it was humiliation. Charlotte found me shaking, eyes red. I showed her everything. She didn't speak, just held me. That silence healed more than 1,000 apologies. Vanessa's betrayal had gone viral in more ways than one. Word spread. Jacob's fiancé posted the screenshots online. Within hours, Vanessa's social media exploded. Friends unfollowed. Colleagues whispered. Olivia left a comment, "You always thought you were above consequences." Vanessa called me crying. I didn't answer. Let the silence scream. Charlotte and I went hiking instead. No phones, just air. Nature doesn't care about betrayal. Each step away from reception felt like shedding skin. I didn't just want distance from Vanessa, I wanted distance from who I was. I saw Vanessa once more, at a grocery store. Her face was gaunt, makeup half done, eyes darting. She smiled weakly. I nodded but didn't stop. She followed me to the parking lot. "Please," she said. "I lost everything." I looked at her. "You chose this." I got into my car. She stood there, motionless. That moment didn't feel victorious. It felt real. Some wounds don't scar, they remain open reminders. I drove away without looking back. Charlotte found my old journal, the one I'd forgotten existed. Inside were scribbles about building a life with Vanessa. Baby names, trip plans. I almost threw it away. Instead, I wrote something new. "You're worth more than what broke you." She saw it, said nothing, just kissed my forehead. That quiet support meant everything. Healing isn't loud, it's a series of small, kind choices. One page, one person, one moment at a time. I finally felt seen. Dr. Evelyn Moore, my new therapist, listened more than she spoke. She helped me reframe it not as a failed marriage, but as a misalignment of values. "She didn't destroy you," she said. "She exposed what needed healing." That line stuck. Vanessa wasn't a villain, she was a mirror. And I didn't like what I saw, but that mirror cracked, and through those breaks, light returned. Charlotte wasn't my replacement story, she was my new chapter. Vanessa's mother called me. She said she was sorry, told me Vanessa wasn't raised to hurt people. I didn't argue. Pain doesn't always come from monsters. Sometimes it comes from people we once loved. I hung up politely, then I blocked the number. Closure doesn't require conversation, it requires boundaries. I texted Charlotte. "Dinner," she replied with a heart. Healing isn't linear, but every time I choose kindness for myself I feel less like a casualty, more like me. Charlotte asked to see my old apartment, the one I shared with Vanessa. I hesitated but agreed. We walked through empty rooms filled with echoes. She touched the wall where our anniversary photos once hung. "You don't have to erase the past," she said. "Just stop letting it define you." I exhaled. For the first time, that space didn't choke me. We left hand in hand, not as a rescue mission but as equals choosing forward, not back. Jacob tried reaching out, email. Then voicemail. We were both played, he said. I laughed bitterly. He wasn't a victim, he was a volunteer. His choices matched Vanessa's in cruelty. I forwarded the voicemail to Olivia. No words needed. Later she replied, "Thank you, not for the message, but for the reminder that we weren't crazy, just hurt." Betrayal isolates, but truth builds bridges between the wounded. Charlotte held me as I hit delete again. At a support group Dr. Moore recommended, I spoke aloud for the first time. "My wife betrayed me, and I thought it was my fault." A woman across the circle nodded. Her eyes filled. We weren't alone, just scattered. Sharing pain doesn't fix it, but it pulls out the splinters. Later, Charlotte hugged me without saying a word. That night, I slept through the night for the first time in months. Healing had a heartbeat again. Vanessa sent a final email, long, teary, full of blame and longing. She said she missed us, that Jacob was a mistake. I read every word, then archived it. Not deleted, archived. A digital headstone. I didn't hate her. I didn't need revenge. I just needed peace. Charlotte and I planted herbs on her balcony that weekend. Mint, basil, rosemary. New roots. Growth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it smells like possibility on a summer breeze. Dr. Moore asked me to write a letter to the old me. I hesitated. Then wrote, "You gave too many second chances, but you still loved. That matters." I cried while writing. Not out of regret, but release. Charlotte found the letter and framed it. "This," she said, "is your reminder." I hung it beside the door. A daily farewell to who I was. And a greeting to who I'm becoming, someone who finally chooses himself first. My birthday came. No message from Vanessa. No guilt, just friends, laughter, and Charlotte's homemade lasagna. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something or someone to ruin it. Olivia sent a card with a single line, "Surviving isn't enough. You deserve to thrive." I smiled. She was right. This wasn't just about moving on, it was about reclaiming joy. And this time, I didn't apologize for feeling whole again. A coworker once close to Vanessa pulled me aside. "You look different," she said, lighter. I nodded, because I finally stopped bleeding for someone who never brought a bandage. She laughed, then hugged me. That unexpected kindness stayed with me. Sometimes, healing shows up in strangers. Sometimes, it's as simple as being seen. Vanessa used to demand my light. Charlotte reflects it. That difference, it's everything. Love doesn't require sacrifice. It honors survival and supports growth. I saw a therapist's note once: trauma doesn't erase love, it teaches us its limits. Vanessa taught me everything I never wanted again. Charlotte taught me what's possible. We booked a weekend trip, no itinerary, no agenda, just space to be. That first morning, I woke up to peace, not panic. No checking phones, no silence thick with lies, just her smiling, the kind of morning I once thought I'd never feel again. But I did. I started writing again, short stories, personal essays. Dr. Moore encouraged it. One piece, titled "The Woman Who Vanished," got picked up by a small blog. Vanessa wasn't named, but she was there in every line of grief and growth. Charlotte read it. Cried, then kissed my hand. You're not broken, she whispered. You're honest. That meant more than closure. Because I wasn't hiding anymore. My story, my scars, my survival, they weren't shameful. They were proof I lived. The day I filed for divorce, I wore the same shirt I wore on our wedding day. Not out of nostalgia but defiance. Vanessa didn't respond to the papers. I didn't need her to. Closure isn't a conversation, it's a decision. Charlotte took me out that night. To freedom, she toasted. I laughed, really laughed. It didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like a return. To myself. To peace. To a life I finally chose. I walked past our old wedding venue last week. For the first time, it didn't hurt. The white archway, once a symbol of forever, was just wood and paint. Charlotte squeezed my hand. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said, because I was. Pain had finally become a chapter, not a weight. I didn't flinch at memories, I nodded at them. That's how healing starts, when your past no longer dictates your steps. It simply walks beside you. One morning, I opened the closet and saw the hoodie Vanessa once wore to make things right. I almost tossed it, then paused. It wasn't power anymore, it was fabric. I folded it and donated it. Not everything painful has to be burned. Some things just need releasing. Charlotte smiled when I told her. You're letting go, she said. Not with rage, with calm. That's the hardest healing of all, when love ends but peace begins. Final papers came in the mail. Divorce complete. I opened the envelope, read the words, and felt free. No celebration, no sorrow, just space. Olivia sent a voice note, proud of you. Charlotte brought wine. We didn't toast to endings, we toasted to clarity. I stood on the balcony, breeze on my face, and whispered goodbye, not to Vanessa, to the version of me that thought pain was proof of love. He's gone, I'm still here. Charlotte and I adopted a rescue dog, Scrappy. Stubborn, full of heart. We named him Chance. He chews everything, hates baths, and sleeps at my feet. Every day, he reminds me that broken doesn't mean unworthy. We're all just trying again. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm walking into it whole. Not haunted. Vanessa is a name in my past. Charlotte, she is part of my present. And me, I'm finally choosing joy.